Guys, my name's Katie, and I'm a dietetics student at Dewville College. And today we're going to talk about plant-based alternatives for milk and how they're similar and how they're different to each other. When you go to the grocery store, there are a lot of different options for what kind of milk to buy. Pause the video and take a minute to see how many different milk substitutes you can come up with as a class. There's a lot, aren't there? So what's the difference between them? You all probably know that their ingredients are different, but how does that affect the nutritional content? Do you think that they have the same amount of macronutrients? The same amount of carbs, protein, and fat? And what about the micronutrients that we usually get from milk, like calcium and vitamin D? Today, we're going to look at an example of almond milk, soy milk, rice milk, and oat milk, and compare them to regular 2% dairy milk, and see what's different in their carbohydrate, protein, and fat content, and in the amount of calcium and vitamin D they contain. Here is regular 2% dairy milk. One serving has 12 grams of carbs, 5 grams of fat, and 8 grams of protein. One serving of regular 2% dairy milk contains 15% of your daily value of vitamin D and 20% of your daily value of calcium. Here is regular unsweetened Almond Breeze brand almond milk. One serving contains 1 gram of carbohydrates, 2.5 grams of fat, and 1 gram of protein. It contains 25% of your daily value, vitamin D, and 35% of your daily value of calcium. Here is Silk brand soy milk. One serving contains 9 grams of carbohydrates, 4.5 grams of fat, and 8 grams of protein. One serving contains 15% of your daily value of vitamin D and 30% of your daily value of calcium. So next we have Rice Dream brand rice milk, which has 30 grams of carbohydrates, 2.5 grams of fat, and 0 grams of protein. It contains 35% of your daily value of vitamin D and 20% of your daily value of calcium. And last, we have Oatly brand oat milk, which contains 16 grams of carbs, 5 grams of fat, and 3 grams of protein. And it contains 20% of your daily value of vitamin D and 25% of your daily value of calcium. And here's how they compare to each other. In terms of carbohydrates, rice milk is all the way at the top with 30 grams of carbohydrates per serving, which is almost double the amount of number 2 on the list, oat milk, which has 16 grams of carbohydrates. At number 3 is dairy milk with 12 grams. Number 4 is soy milk with 9 grams. And last is almond milk with only 1 gram of carbohydrate per serving. Next, we have fat. Oat and dairy milk are tied for first place with 5 grams of fat each. Soy milk is just underneath that with 4.5 grams. And rice and almond milk are tied for the least amount of fat with 2.5 grams per serving each. And for protein, soy and dairy milk are tied for first place with 8 grams of protein per serving. Soy and dairy milk have more than double the protein of the next highest milk, which is oat milk with 3 grams. Almond milk has only 1 gram of protein, and rice milk has no protein at all. Our final rankings for vitamin D content. Rice milk is all the way at the top with 35% of your daily value. And second is almond milk with 25%. Oat milk has 20%. And soy and dairy milk tied at the bottom with 15% of your daily value. For calcium, we have almond milk at the top with 35% of your daily value. Soy milk coming in second with 30%. oat milk with 25, and rice and dairy milk tied at the bottom with 20%. In order to see how these different types of milk behave in recipes, we're going to use them to make instant pudding and see how they turn out. First is regular 2% dairy milk. We're measuring out 2 cups of milk and whisking it together with the pudding mix. As you can see, this is a very complex and exciting recipe. Now we let it set for 5 minutes, and this is what it looks like. This is regular pudding texture and consistency, and now we're going to see how the rest of them compare. Next, we're going to try almond milk. A quick Google search will tell you that milk substitutes don't work the same way in pudding as dairy milk, and that in order to get it to work, you have to change the ratio. So we're going to split the pudding mix in half and do one normally and one with half the amount of milk. First, we're going to do the normal one. So here we've got 1 cup of almond milk and half the pudding mix. Let's see what happens when we try to mix it together. So we let it set for 5 minutes, and this is what it looks like. It is very, very liquidy. Almond milk does not work with that ratio. So next we are going to try half a cup instead of 1 cup and see how that goes. So we mix that together, and what we end up with is this very thick textured, not quite pudding. So somewhere in between 1 cup and a half cup is going to be the sweet spot for this. So just out of curiosity, I'm going to pour in a little bit of the liquidy pudding that we made just a second ago and see what happens. So this is about a third of what I made before. And mixing it together, it's still pretty thick. So I think that I'm going to add a little bit more and see how that goes. So we're adding in about another third of the more liquidy pudding, whisking that together, and that gives us actually pretty decent pudding. That's a pretty normal pudding texture. And you can see there's not much left of the other pudding. So to get the right consistency with almond milk, you need just a little bit less liquid than what the box tells you. And taste-wise, the pudding that we made with almond milk tasted pretty much exactly the same as the pudding we made with dairy milk. Now, I'd like to point out that the pudding that I'm using specifically says on the box that you cannot make it with soy milk. But we're going to ignore that and we're going to do it anyway, and we will see how it goes. So we're going to pour 1 cup of soy milk for the first half of the pudding mix. And we are going to whisk that together. And after setting for 5 minutes, it is still very, very liquidy. It seems pretty similar to the way the almond milk was at this ratio. So we're going to half the liquid and we're going to try again. And whisking this together, it's pretty immediately obvious that it's going to be a lot thicker. And after setting, it is very thick. So we're going to do the same thing, and we're going to see what happens when we add about a third of the liquidy pudding. After whisking that together, we can see that this is a pretty normal pudding texture. So the box was wrong. You can make pudding with soy milk. Now, the taste was a little bit different than the almond milk and the dairy milk. I don't know how to describe it other than it tastes like it was made with soy milk, but I think it tastes pretty good. All right, so next up we have rice milk. Again, we're going to start off with 1 cup and see what that ratio gets us. And just from the initial mixing it together, it seems like this one's going to be pretty liquidy too. After it sets for 5 minutes, we can see that it is very, very liquidy. I think this one is probably the most liquidy of all of them. So next we're going to try having the liquid again and seeing what that does. And whisking it together, it's immediately a lot thicker. And as I keep mixing it together, it keeps getting thicker and thicker and almost gooey. And after setting it for 5 minutes, we get this. This is not pudding. It's like a gel. Okay, look at this. Look how see-through it is. This is not pudding. I don't know what this is, but this is not pudding. It also somehow doesn't taste like anything. The only taste that I get from this is very vaguely sweet. It does not taste like vanilla. It does not taste like pudding. It's just sort of a tasteless gel. And finally, we have oat milk. Again, starting with 1 cup. And I apologize for how weird this is going to look because I could not use the other bowl, so I'm using a tiny bowl and being very careful while I'm whisking. And even though it's thin while I'm whisking it, it does initially seem a lot creamier than the other thin ones. And after setting for 5 minutes, it's pretty thin, but it does seem to have a nice texture. So we're going to try it again with the 1/2 cup. Again in the tiny bowl. So this is a little bit thick. It actually kind of has the consistency of cake batter. Kind of smells like cake batter too. So we're going to add a little bit of the more liquidy pudding and see how that turns out. And that's still a little thick. So we're going to add a little bit more. And we're going to add even more because it's still a little bit thick. And that seems to have done it. That is a very nice pudding texture. And personally, I think that the oat milk has the creamiest texture and the best flavor out of all of them. I mentioned earlier that it kind of smells like cake batter. It also kind of tastes like cake batter. It's very sweet, and the vanilla flavor is really strong, stronger than in all of the rest of them. So now we've come to the end of our lesson on milk substitutes and the differences between them. Did you learn anything new today? Knowing what you know now about the different milk substitutes, which ones do you want to try? I really enjoyed creating this video for you guys. And if you want to learn more about plant-based nutrition, you can go and visit the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics website, www.eatright.org.